Hi everyone, welcome back to GoLocal Live. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning in this hot Friday afternoon. Would like to welcome in a regular GoLocal columnist, Robert Whitcomb, to talk about the latest in news and politics. Let's start off on the national level. Of course, the 2 nights of Democratic debates last night seemed to have the most fireworks. What's your reaction?
Well, I think my reaction is very conventional and predictable. Kamala Harris is very impressive, much better speaker than Joe Biden. I think Biden's age issue came out. He didn't look particularly good. He didn't really answer these tough questions very well, and he wasn't very impressive. But that often happens when he actually gets into presidential races. He looks great until he starts to run for president, and then things tend to fall apart. And I think the other thing, I'm pretty old too, so I'm sympathetic, but he's just too old. Bernie Sanders looked pretty old too, but actually much more together. Even though he had a kind of hectoring, kind of lunatic on the front steps aspect to him, kind of the town crank.
Well,
but he was coherent.
But that's his shtick. That's Larry David and
Curb
Your Enthusiasm.
That's it, right?
That's Bernie.
He seemed actually pretty sharp. He was a little bit older than Joe Biden. The other Buttigieg was, I think, very good. The way he, took responsibility for the shooting, not for shooting anybody, but for the situation, the environment, police versus the community in South Bend. Mm-hmm. I thought he was articulate and honest and very intelligent, very impressive. But those are the most impressive people.
Can Biden rebound?
I don't think so. Could be wrong. I think a lot of people like him. They want to vote for him. He's a very, kind of a comfortable character, sort of an old shoe, but I just don't think he's got the chops to make it through the campaign.
Do you think he's articulated, this is the former Vice President Biden, really a vision for the future? Because apart from the age factor.
Keeps talking about Obama. Well, Obama's not in office anymore. And he kept referring several times to the Obama-Biden administration. Well, vice presidents aren't that important. They're basically, they're holding pattern people.
Well, I think it'll be very interesting to see what the polls look like after this past week on the Democratic side. Let's talk about a national group looking here at Rhode Island and Providence schools. The Johns Hopkins report released this week.
It was distressing, but as GoLocal and other people reported, there's a somewhat similar report that came out about 25 years ago. I assume everything's worse now. I think this could be good news because it will probably force the state, I would think, I'm guessing, before the end of the summer to take over the district. The district clearly cannot fix the schools itself. And so the only thing to do is have the state education authorities come in and take it over. And I think this could be pretty messy. I'm not sure how much, with home rule and everything, how much the full extent of the authority of the state to come in, but I think we could see contracts thrown out, a lot of people fired. I mean, big stuff has to happen. Certainly some of the labor contracts probably have to be sliced up, But I think that the good thing about this, I think this time it's getting a lot of attention, that this is a crisis, this is an economic and sociological, cultural crisis that affects the entire area, the state, but even the broader area. This is the second biggest metro area in New England. Providence, overwhelmingly the biggest city. It's the state capital. This has to be addressed for the long-term improvement of the economy and society in general.
So let's talk a little bit about that response. Immediately, the Rhode Island Department of Education put together community forums. GoLocal was there at the debate school on Wednesday night. They're holding, I believe,
I think next week,
throughout the next couple of weeks.
They're moving pretty fast on this thing.
So
and
here's my
the
question.
new person is trying to get all the information, but I think they've got to have something out well before the opening of school.
Here's my question for you. Providence Mayor Jorge Lorza in Hawaii for the Conference of Mayors. What's your thoughts on that? He's clearly previously committed to it. He's involved with a number of forums. But speaking of forums, he won't be present at a number of forums here pertaining to education. And City Council Finance slated for a meeting this afternoon, and again tomorrow on an unprecedented Saturday. Won't be here for that as well. What's your thoughts?
Bad timing. I don't know precisely what he would be doing in Hawaii. So before I could give a full answer, I'd have to know what he would miss by not being in Hawaii and being
If he
back
was on
here.
a panel talking about citizenship question,
No, he should be here.
immigration.
If that's it, unless there's some kind of economic benefit from this trip, not for him, but for the city, contacts there, or something like that, we don't know about. I mean, this is a terrible time to, on a trip like this. It's the end of a fiscal year and all this other stuff going on. So it's kind of hard to see if anything would rise to the level of justifying this trip at this time. I'm not against some of these trips, these junkets, whatever. They make contacts, can sometimes be helpful for a state or a city, and they aren't always bad. Sometimes they're great. Some of the foreign trips can be very useful, bringing in new jobs. But in this case, the timing, it looks pretty bad.
Well, let's talk a little bit, speaking of timing, with your piece coming out on Sunday, what we can expect to hear from you.
Well, I'm talking about one. I think Trump is quite right in signing this order that will require hospitals to give more information about how much procedures for injuries and illnesses will cost, or at least some more accurate estimate. If they can also translate the jargon, the medical jargon.
That's the key point.
This gibberish, what are you actually going on? And I give an example. I had a triple bypass quite a few years ago, and the difference between the official price, which was 170 grand, and what the final negotiated price was like, I don't know, 38,000, something like that. So, and I remember a physician over at Rhode Island Hospital where they did the actual surgery, what was this huge number of meetings? I don't pay any attention to that. They just put something down. But of course, if you had no insurance at all, that would be your bill.
Yes.
But then it's negotiated. So the whole system is so crazy. And I think that Trump, he deserves credit for signing this order to make some of this stuff more transparent. But another big problem is that more and more of the hospitals are being swallowed up in chains, so they have more and more pricing power. So when you say, we're going to give this information so it can comparison shop.
What's the comparison?
To go where? To go where?
It's a monopoly.
It's a monopoly. So that's certainly a problem. And if we have time to mention something. Okay, so I talk about that. Obviously, the problem in schools. I also do a kind of a rumination on brown furniture.
Brown furniture?
Not the university, but old antiques. And the price of antiques, of old stuff, early 20th century, going back to, in New England, say 1600, is plunging. And I do kind of rumination on that because we have a little bit of old stuff. It's not worth much, and the price is plunging by the minute. But I think it's kind of sad that the younger people, millennials, are uninterested in this. They want experiences, in quotes. But it's all this stuff, an old desk, an old grandfather clock, an old chair, has a history, has a, it's sort of evocative. It's individuals. And I think this reflects, as a guy writing in Yankee magazine said, this reflects a dwindling interest in history and dwindling knowledge of it. So I think this is kind of sad, and and it's too bad. And I don't say anything about the debate because my physician asked me not to. The other thing, I talk about in the Democratic Party, my 2 cents worth about what they should not be doing. They should not be pushing reparations, which would be virtually impossible to set a metric to do, no matter how many supercomputers you had, figure out who owed what. I think they should be very careful about speaking a lot of Spanish in public events, because that turns off anti-immigration people who might otherwise vote for the Democrats on bread and butter issues. And what's the other thing? And kind of cool the obsession with transgendered and gay rights a bit, because that doesn't speak to the biggest concerns, which are basically economic, lunch pail stuff, wallet stuff. And let me see, and then I do have to praise again the Raimondo administration for someone was on the Department of Business Regulation person was on.
Yes,
GoLocal.
Liz Tanner talking about
regulation, and they have made some progress in that. I think she claims they've cut regs by a third, and I think that's great. I think that could help the state a lot in the long run. More needs to be done. The only problem with that is part of the problem is you've got 39 cities and towns, so have their own little regulations. So they have to.
They're a little fiefdoms.
They're a little fiefdoms.
If you didn't catch Liz Tanner, I highly suggest that.
Yeah,
you
that
watch
was kind of a good news.
Yeah.
Good news. As is again the Johns Hopkins report on how terrible the province schools are, because I think it will